Nearly everyone has had a job that just simply sucked. In this podcast, we dive into the terrible workplaces that exist, either due to customer interactions, horrible bosses, bad culture, or environment. Tune in each episode to hear interviews and news stories of why work sucks.
Hello, my name is Brian Lamar, and I am the host of this episode of the podcast Work Sucks, where we talk about all the different ways that everything that makes work suck, basically, whether it's a bad boss, a bad environment, dealing with Karens, or just crappy pay, being overworked, unappreciated, all those sorts of things fall in that category. Today, we have a special guest. Her name is Amber. She's calling in from Alabama, and she's going to talk to us about a job that she had in the past that just absolutely sucked, and she would never want to do it again, but she's here to talk to us about it today. Amber, thanks for coming on the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good. So you were telling me over Facebook that you had a job in the past that just absolutely sucked. Tell us about that job.
Yes, absolutely. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it was my worst job, but I would say that it was probably one of the worst experiences that I personally had at a job in dealing with my personal life.
Well, okay. So before we go forward and talk about that one, what was the worst job you ever had?
Oh, the worst job that I ever had. So I worked for a printer sales company at one point in time. And, well, let's just say that the boss and his wife, or the owner and his wife, had a lot of personal issues to the point that he even came into work one day with a black eye. And when I acted concerned and asked him what happened, he told me the truth and said his wife was drunk and hit him in the face with a cell phone. So
It must have been, like you say, a black eye. It must have been one of those old Nokia bricks, because those things could really pack a punch. So those things can survive a nuclear blast. So, yeah, they'd probably give you a black eye.
Yeah, come to find out, we were behind in telephone bills, which is, the heart of your business at that point, and taxes and all sorts of things. So the place eventually got shut down. But yeah, that was a very interesting experience, to say the least.
So do you know why she beat his ass? Was it because he didn't pay the phone bill?
Well, she just apparently had a drinking problem and did not know how to control her temper.
Well, it seems like to me, though, if somebody is going to beat you with a phone and you didn't pay the phone bill, well, that's probably why. So, coincidence? I think not. But anyways, we're not here to talk about your boss that got his butt kicked by Amber Heard wannabe. But what I do want to talk to you about is a job that you told me about over Facebook Messenger, that where your interaction with this particular job just made it just shitty, and it made work suck for you. So tell me about that job. What industry was that job in?
Yes, so this was basically a local, I will say, government agency. I guess to be a little bit more specific, it was a utility company.
Today, Junior.
Yeah. So I was the executive assistant to the general manager there. And the situation that occurred, so I am lesbian and part of the LGBTQ community, and I had been in a long-term relationship with my partner, who was a local teacher and was not out at the time. So it was a little bit of a struggle as far as, being so personal within our jobs, just to protect, her and our family. So we ran into a situation not long after I came on to this position, and her mother, unfortunately, had passed away with stage 4 colon cancer. And so I went to my general manager, and I had some flex time built up. I had not been there long enough to have personal leave. So they were letting me use hours that I had worked over as flex time. So I explained to him the situation and basically came out to my general manager and just, asked for the opportunity to be able to attend her funeral and go to pay my respects to her and the family.
So let me get this straight. The reason why you felt that you had to come out at that point was because you're using flex time and you had to make a justification of why you wanted to go to this funeral. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So up until this point, your boss, your supervisor, didn't really know your personal situation.
No, he only knew me in a professional environment, and I did, keep my personal and professional life separate. And at that point in time, there were no federal or state protections for sexual orientation and that sort of thing. And the funny thing about that particular position is, whenever I applied for the position, I actually wasn't even looking for a job. I was not unhappy at the job that I was working at the time, but this job came up and all of the benefits and everything sounded great. So I just thought, hey, what the heck? And I threw my name in the hat and just thought, we'll roll the dice and see what happens. And so they called me to come in for an interview. The interview went great. They called me back and said, we've narrowed it down to the top 3. We'd like for you to come back in for a second interview. So I asked them just to, let me think about it a little bit, because I said, I appreciate, your time and you making me a part of the top 3. I was very thankful for that. And, but just, being honest, I was not unhappy at my current job, and the amount that they were offering at the time, it just really didn't justify making that move at the time. And so they asked me if it were financial, and I was honest about that and just said that, not necessarily, but overall, taking all things into consideration, it didn't really justify the move. And so they called me back and offered me a substantial amount more money to come back for a second interview. And when I got off the call, I thought, they're not, nobody offers more money for you to come for another interview. They're offering me the job. So they basically made their decision. They just didn't really want to, I guess, show all their cards at that point. So I came back for the second interview and just made sure that I covered all of my bases to protect myself and planning my future moving forward. And I did take the job.
Okay. So I guess if I was going to pick on you a little bit, I'd say you were a victim of the old phrase, the grass is not always greener on the other side, huh?
Oh, absolutely. And, after this situation happened, I've definitely decided that I will never sacrifice my happiness for a dollar amount.
Okay, well, that's kind of a bold statement because, yeah, you're right. Money does bring security. Money does bring a set of things that make you feel a little bit nicer about your security and your ability to do stuff with that money. But you're right, it doesn't bring happiness within itself. The working environment is more important. So tell me a little bit more. So you went and you had this. So did you go to the funeral? I guess we haven't got that far yet.
I did. Well, so we had the candid conversation about just the situation that was going on and just getting his approval to have this time off and just what had happened and that sort of thing. And so he did allow me to take the one day to attend the funeral and be with the family. And essentially at that time I considered this person my mother-in-law. She was part of my family, and also, just down to the fact that I had spent a lot of time with her in what in the beginning we thought was her healing process. And when, the time came, she was just an amazing person, and I spent a lot of time with her. But I even spent time with her and fed her last meal before she passed. So we did have, a very close relationship. And this was a person that was very important to me. And just a huge, just personality and soul within our family.
Okay, so Amber, here's the deal. I've only heard the cliff notes of this story before, as you were kind of explaining it, but with the pre-interview here before we went on the show. But I'm already sensing, in the fact that you're telling the story in the first place, but I'm already sensing that there's some danger down the road. That red flags are coming up. Did you already feel some red flags when you had to put in this, and then there was like a hesitation of whether you were going to get approved for this or not?
I did. Whenever we had the conversation, I did notice that his personality towards me shifted, because this was a few days prior to the memorial service. And so there was time spent in the office with each other. And I absolutely did notice that even just in having the conversation, his body language changed. Just his attitude towards me. He was not as open and warm as he had been prior to this conversation.
Okay. So right there, you're already starting to understand where you stand with this guy immediately after this. But was there anything else, though, other than maybe your perception? Because I'll tell you right now, I've had problems with either a coworker or a boss in the past where I sensed a shift. And then I'm sitting there and I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, I'm just going through my head. I'm laying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, what did I do? Did you have any of that?
Not necessarily. I mean, when this conversation happened, I did, and I did expect that there was going to be, a level of uncomfort after we had this conversation. But I felt that as far as my professional life and the task at hand, the job at hand, I was, excelling in that position, and had been told so several times about just how thankful they were that, I had joined the team and how well I was doing and that sort of thing. So I felt like that professional relationship would take precedence, and that the personal, feelings or opinions would not matter as much. I can understand that there are certain people out there that are not accepting, and I don't ask you to accept or approve. I don't need that, but we are, or we should, respect one another just as human beings in general. And that was just something that I didn't expect for it to shift in that manner.
Well, I just want to remind the listeners at this point, at no point are we talking about your, performance on the job. We're not talking about your ability to do the job.
Right.
It's specifically about this personal choice, or not personal choice, but your personal situation, your marital or not quite marital, but your life partner situation. It's not a lack of doing the job that you're asked to do. It's completely something else.
Right. The performance was definitely there, and that had been shown and proven time and time again, and had never been, an object of discussion, or there was never any problem with anything that had to do with the position or the job.
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand what's going on here, because up until this point, you and I have not talked about you getting counseled or written up or anything like that about your performance. So after the funeral, going down the road. So obviously you're on the show here. You don't work for them anymore. So what ended up happening after that, the funeral, and when you came back to work and there was some awkwardness?
Well, so the day after the funeral, when I came back, he, like I said, was my general manager. I was the executive assistant at the time. So my office was located directly outside his. He had to go through mine to get out into, the lobby or any other area of the business. the day that I returned, he pretty much stayed in his office all day. It was very quiet. Whenever I would have some communication with him, just about, certain questions on how to move forward on specific tasks or decision making, that sort of thing. It was just very short, cut and dry, not a lot of conversation, that sort of thing. The following day, when I came back, he did approach me and seemed concerned, and just asked how things went and told me that he, was sorry for our loss and that sort of thing. And then things got a little quiet for a while, and I think that he took some time to kind of think about how he was going to approach what he, his conversation with me as to just what he thought at this point about me and my future with that particular business.
Okay, so he's decided to confront you.
Right. So he calls me into his office and wants to have a discussion, and he starts in, with the whole, I just want you to know that I'm very sorry for your loss, and, I hate that this has happened. I know that this was a hard situation, yada, yada, yada. But then he starts questioning me about my personal life, just things that he was curious about, and not, I would say, not in a disrespectful manner, as if what you could attribute to, like, a sexual harassment type situation. It was just more along the lines of personal questions that really just were none of his business, sort of thing, And I think he was looking for me to explain myself to him, and he wanted just understanding of why I am a lesbian. And that's something that I have come across a lot in my life, just mainly because, it's a very ignorant outlook that people have, especially for, people who are, I've always said that people are afraid of what they don't understand, for one. And that could be anything. But I have been approached several times in my life by people who will say certain things like, well, I never thought that this is who you were because, you don't look like, you don't seem like, you don't act like. And it's like, well, there is no look or seem or act. I mean, we are people of all different types of personalities and interests and education and nationalities, and there's so many different things. So there is no type, really. But the people that don't understand sometimes tend to have that thought process. So that was the conversation, I guess, that we were having. That was the direction that it seemed to go. It was just something that he never expected, which, that's fine, but it still has absolutely nothing to do with you as my boss or me in this position. So, I respectfully answered some of the questions and also kind of let him know when he was just getting a little bit too close for comfort in that sense, just things that frankly were just none of his business. And so his response to me in so many words were that he basically reprimanded me like he was my father. And just scolded me in a way and let me know how disappointed he was and unhappy that I had been chosen for that position at this point. He had pretty much made up his mind that he no longer wanted me to represent him or that business, and told me flat out that I was going to hell.
Okay, well, that's pretty bold. So, again, I'd like to remind the listeners, at no point are we talking about her work performance. We're talking about her lifestyle, which, I can kind of concede a little bit. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a new job and I say, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you married? You got kids? Things like that. Okay, so that conversation I could see kind of happening, in a way, like if somebody is truly full of equality in their heart, then they would ask those same questions. Oh, hey, Amber, tell me about yourself. You got a family? You got kids? Got spouse? What's going on? But the fact that now you're being told that you're a disappointment to the company, like it's like a tarnish on their brand or something. I don't know.
Right.
But then to bring your not only your lifestyle but your after lifestyle coming into this, you're going to hell.
Right.
Oh boy! I tell you what, I think I might have a couple of relatives that would give me that conversation though if I had that kind of conversation with them. But there is a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of fear out there for anything different than what they know with the regular old heterosexual thing. So, but anyways, this is your story. I'm going to stop interrupting. So tell me, after that conversation, I'm assuming things devolved into not so great workplace.
Oh, absolutely not. So at that point, I was very frank and responded to him, basically gave him a new address and respectfully told him in a way that he might even enjoy moving to that new address, and told him where the job could go. And, that I was highly disappointed in the way that I had been treated, and also the fact that, I specifically said that if there were anything, that had to do with me as a professional or my job, if there were anything, that I had done that was unsatisfactory, let's discuss that. We can discuss that. We can pull up, let's get some paperwork drawn up. Let's do whatever it is that we need to do. But when it comes to not just my personal life, but you have insulted me as a human being, you have insulted my family at that point. And not only that, you also know the situation that I have just dealt with. And that, a person who was very close to me that we had just lost. And, there were so many emotions that came from that. It was, on one hand, it was just disgust. It was just disbelief. I never imagined, and I have been very fortunate with my family and with my friends and my coworkers and employers in my life. I have always just been the type of person who is just unapologetically who I am. And, I don't ever try to push my beliefs or my lifestyle or anything like that onto someone else. To each his own. But it just, there were just so many emotions. It was just kind of like, being kicked when you're down and just all of those things. And there was so much to process in that moment. And, I was put in a situation where, I had heard horror stories from other friends of mine where, they had been outcast by friends or family or employers. People had been kicked out of their homes and just different things. And I felt for them, but I just never imagined, and myself, I guess, being in that situation. I think I believed, maybe a little naively, that if I was, held my head high and was just proud of who I was and didn't really give anybody the opportunity to question that maybe I wouldn't come across a situation like that. I don't know. So it was very shocking, very disappointing. And, so, it was also hard because I was very close to a lot of the employees there already. I had already developed relationships with those employees. And, here we've got basically, this is the general manager of everyone. And it just kind of felt like the building had crumbled at that point.
So, obviously, you're still here with us talking about this. You overcame this, but
yes.
Tell me about when you decided that you had to leave this organization due to let's just call it irreconcilable differences or discrimination. That's a better term. You decided to leave. How did it affect you?
Well, it gave me a lot of fear. A lot of fear to move forward and go anywhere else and be able to be open and honest about just my life and me as a person. I mean, this is not something that is a choice or anything like that. This is who I am as an individual, and who I will always be every day for the rest of my life. That's never going to change. And so when you are faced with a situation like that, there's a lot of angst involved. Fortunately, I was able to return to my former employer. They were very gracious and very kind to have me back, and they were thankful to have me back, which in turn, I was thankful also. But they welcomed me back with open arms, and I came back for a huge pay cut because, this certain position, it had a great retirement. It had great pay, great benefits, and I thought that I had just hit the jackpot, and I was at a very young age, and so this was almost unheard of for me. The person that I was actually replacing at the time when I first took that job, she was retiring at 47. So it was just a great plan for my personal future and for my family as well. So thankfully, I was able to return to my former employer, but it also has kind of stifled me in the sense that I have still been there ever since. And this happened in 2013. So technically, I have been, with the exception of leaving for that small portion of time to go to that terrible employer, I have been with this particular company for about 13 years, with the exception of that. So right now,
so in a way, you found a safe space.
I did. And it has absolutely been a safe space, but I will say ultimately I found myself almost 10 years down the road now, and in almost, I love my job. I love what I do. I love the people that I support, but it also definitely held me back as far as pay and benefits and those sorts of things are concerned, because I was always terrified to leave them again to go pursue anything that might be a better future for me and my family, because I didn't want to experience that again. I didn't want to go through that and be, left wondering, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing is this pretty much in a couple of different ways put you back in the closet.
Yeah, technically. So where I am now, back years ago, we did develop some federal protections, and that was great. But even still at that point, with the way that the laws were, if you were to go outside of a, federal organization or position, you weren't protected on the outside. And we are, at a level where we have that now. But the issue with certain states, and Alabama being one of those states, is we are an at-will state. So it's very possible that you could run into a position or an employer that has, personal feelings about that and might, just let you go because they can, because in Alabama, technically, they don't have to have a specific reason.
So for the listeners out there, we'll get into it a little bit more, and maybe after this interview, I will give a more in-depth explanation. But an at-will state is basically a state that doesn't have laws that protect employees like some other states do, where an employer has pretty much 100% control of what they can do as far as firing someone for little to no reason.
Right.
Now, that doesn't give the employers the legal basis to discriminate against someone based off of race or gender or sexual orientation or religion, things like that. But it does give them the ability to fire you for a non-discriminatory matter. Just, they can make up a work performance issue or something like that. So, so at-will states, if you are different in any way, that it really, you're out on a limb.
Yes.
So what's the advice that you would give somebody that is in or is currently in the situation that you found yourself in? What would be the biggest pieces of advice that you would give somebody?
Well, I think ultimately, it's absolutely not something that is a comfortable situation or something that you always feel like you could trust. But I would say always stand up for yourself, no matter what. Stand firm in your beliefs. You know, there is nothing more badass than being who you are. And I will always believe that. And there is power in that. Live your truth. Be proud of yourself. Don't let anyone else make you feel less than just because you're different. There's a quote that pops out in my head. I remember being in high school with a girl in one of my English classes that was, she was a little different than everyone else, and that was okay. She was very unique. She was a sweet girl, but a lot of the kids in our class didn't look at her as what they would consider typically normal, And I will never forget one day we had to write some sort of, just summary or journal type entry or something like that. And she made a quote, or she, had written this little summary and came up with this quote or found this quote somewhere. Honestly, I'm not really sure, but she said, you all look at me, that because I'm different. You talk about me because I'm different. But you're afraid of me because I'm different. But what scares me is that you are all the same. And that has always stood out in my mind. And I think that it is so important to just, be unapologetically who you are. Don't allow anyone else to make you feel like you either don't belong, or, are weird or anything like that, for being who you are. Be proud of yourself, be confident. And a lot of times I kind of live by the mantra, sometimes you have to fake it to make it. But the issue is it's kind of like developing a habit. The more that you do it, the more you get used to it, the more, that becomes something that is normal for you. And it might not necessarily be your, strong point to go out and be open or be proud or be confident or be good at, certain things, public speaking or just anything of that nature. But if you practice just pride and confidence, you will develop that, and you will get to a point to where you realize that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you, and anyone who makes you feel like there is, then there's something wrong with them.
Well, Amber, you've kind of said a mouthful there that I completely agree with. Confidence and all that is good. And I would also the only thing I'd add to that is when you're being your true self. Also, remember, just because you're being your true self doesn't mean that you're 100% protected, especially in these at-will states. So also be smart, Yes. When you're talking to folks, that have your financial fate in their hands. Try to also be a little bit diplomatic as well, but never sacrifice who you are. I believe that 100%. And Amber, I want to thank you for having the courage to come on the show to talk about this particular instance. Sometimes you just get a work environment or a boss that just absolutely suck, and you got to make a change. And in your case, you made a big life change. So with that, I think we're going to close out this interview. And like I promised the listeners earlier, I'm going to go ahead and do a little research and just maybe give a brief little explanation before the show ends on what at-will states are and what an employee's rights are. Well, again, Amber, thank you very much for being on the show, and we really enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I've had fun.
All right. Hey, folks, this is Brian again, and we just talked with Amber, and during the conversation, we talked about how her employer pretty much ran her off for being a member of the LGBTQ community. Now, we talked about at-will states. I did a little research on this, and I was pretty astounded by what I found. An at-will state is one where employers are allowed to adopt an at-will policy for employees that give both the employer and the employee the right to terminate employment relationship without any cause or any notice. This is allowed in all states in Montana, except for Montana. So the whole country except for Montana. So, like I said, all states except for Montana are at will, but most of them do have exceptions. The states of Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Nebraska, Maine, New York, and Rhode Island do not have any exceptions. So pretty much you're at the mercy of your employer. So if your employer doesn't like something that about you, they can terminate you with no reason, no notice, no cause. Now there's two different things. There's the at will, which is what we just talked about. And then there's also right to work. So some states have a different category. The way to compare right to work and employment at will is basically you can realize they're separate concepts because they're not opposite. One concerns your freedom to work without joining a union. The other is the employer's freedom to fire you. So I found a little tip online. At-will employment means that you can quit or be fired for almost any reason. Right to work means that you can work for a unionized employer without joining the union. The relevant laws vary from state to state and change over time. At-will employment termination, there's some lawyers on a site that I found called work.cron.com says the at-will concept of employment is simple. You can be fired for almost any reason, anytime, without any warning. You can also walk out at any time without giving notice. The opposite of an at-will employment is when you can only be fired for just cause, such as incompetence or theft. A written contract or union agreement can guarantee you're only fired for cause, but most employees work without those. So I guess that's the difference. I've never known this as a difference. So at will, you can be fired for any reason, but if you have a union, the only reason that there's places where that stops you from being fired for any reason is because you have a union that has those checks and balances in there. I hope that has given everybody a little bit more insight of what the at-will work is and the right to work is. So I guess that's something to consider on your next employment. Is there a union? What is their rate of using this at-will clause to fire people without notice? So just something to think about when you're looking for a new job. All right, folks, I hope this has been enlightening. I know I enjoyed talking with Amber and learned a few things. So, all right, have a good night.
This has been an episode of Work Sucks. Work Sucks is a podcast in the Lamar Communications Group. For questions or a chance to have your story featured on this podcast, email the host at brian.lamar1453@gmail.com.